Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the Home Organization Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to Room by Room, the Home Organization Science Insights podcast. Now, living in a shared space can present unique challenges when it comes to organization and maintaining a clutter-free environment. From establishing clear boundaries to optimizing storage solutions, there are murky waters to wade through. But fear not, for we are being guided by home organizing expert Shira Gill on a mission to help people clear physical and mental clutter one small step at a time. Shira is the best-selling author of 2 books, Minimalist and Organized Living. She also has a new book coming out, so we are really excited to hear about that. Hi, Shira. It's great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So tell us a bit about your new book that's coming out and the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, so my first 2 books really dive into the home and the realm of how to edit and organize your home life. And when I finished these books, I really had this kind of epiphany and thought, well, what if I applied these same principles to creating a framework to help create more spaciousness and ease and alignment in not just your home, but all areas of your life. So my new book, Lifestyled, will dig into that and will really address every part of your life, from relationships to career, finance, personal development, even health, wellness, and of course, I touch a little bit on the home because I can't help myself.
That's amazing. It sounds like a really holistic book as well. Who would you say would benefit the most from your book?
I think anyone who's feeling overwhelmed, overscheduled, just over it. That's really the demographic that I work with most. I really think that this book is applicable to anyone who's just feeling like they have too much clutter in their lives and want to do things differently.
Yeah, it sounds like a great book. So thank you for sharing that. And it's really great to hear. I'm really keen to learn more about minimalistic living strategies from you. I'm a maximalist and my partner is a minimalist. So I could definitely take a page out of your book. But before we go further into detail, I'd love to get to know you better. This is Have You Met Shira? And my first question for you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, I like to travel as much as possible, even if I don't have the capacity to go on a big international trip, which I do try to do several times a year. Even just taking a little road trip. I am based in the California area of the United States, right by the San Francisco Bay Area. So luckily we can drive basically 45 minutes in any direction and be in a different city or town or climate. So that's really my favorite, is just getting out, exploring, walking around and seeing new sights and trying new foods.
Yeah, you're in a really, really good area. I love San Francisco, and 45 minutes to another city is really, really good. Like in Australia, here, it takes like over an hour to get to another city. It's so long. Road trips are really, really long. There's some road trips I've been on that are like 5 hours long, and I'm nowhere near leaving the States. It's
Wow.
yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I even live, 3 blocks away from another city. So we're just surrounded, and I can drive from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 5 hours across the whole state. So it is fun to just explore different environments.
That's honestly sounds so pleasant. And but I guess the grass is always greener on the other side because is nice to sometimes
Yes.
go on road trips where it's like plains and plains. But what would you say are your favorite spots to visit, or any spots that are the top on your bucket list?
Yeah, well, actually, Australia is on the top of my bucket list. It's so far away from where I live, which is the only reason I haven't been yet. Thailand is another one. So both of those, I would say, are like right at the top right now. I tend to spend a lot of time going back and forth between California and New York. I have a lot of family in New York and have clients in New York. So I'm very coastal in the US. I'd love to explore the rest of the US, but really my dream is to be able to visit every continent. So I've spent a lot of time in Europe. I've done North America, South America, a little bit of Asia. I've spent time in Tokyo, but there's so much more that I'd like to do.
For sure. I definitely relate to you there, except that the places that I visit are inverted from yours. So I've done a lot of Asia and Southeast Asia, especially, and Australia. And I did a little bit of the US as well, going to San Francisco and Los Angeles. But apart from that, just not as much. And I'd love to see New York. It just seems like a place that you just have to visit at least once in your life.
I think so. Yes, I would
Yeah.
endorse that. Yeah, it's a really special city, and you can never run out of things to do in New York.
Yeah, for sure. And your options sound great as well. Thailand's a good option. There's so many cities to visit with different landscapes. Bangkok is so city-like, with everything just so close to each other. And then nearby is this coastal area as well, Hua Hin and this Phuket. So lots of options there. And if you're going all the way to that other side of the planet, you might as well
Yeah.
check out a few spots at the same time. So hopefully that comes true for you soon.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope it's in my future.
Yeah. But aside from travel, at home, is there a room or a space that you love the most?
Yeah, I'm actually sitting in it right now. This is my dining room, but it's also where my kids do art and homework, and I record podcasts and I write books. It's kind of this hub, this multi-purpose hub in our home, and it gets great light. It's always super sunny, and we keep the space really minimal so that it can really lend itself to any activity we feel like doing. So this is kind of my happy place in my home.
That's a great way to approach it. I feel like the dining room has kind of become a norm as a multifunctional space, especially since COVID. But it's a great way to approach it as well because before COVID, I had this mentality that if you want to. If you want to have a space to do all of these tasks and all of these projects and ventures, you have to have a dedicated room to it. But I've realized as time goes on that just perpetuates that maximalism and that idea that you don't have to clean up and you don't have to put things away because you don't have to. But in a multifunctional room like your dining room, where you make it multifunctional, you're kind of forced to put it away, which isn't bad.
Right. No, it's kind of a baked in form of accountability, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
we can't eat dinner if my work stuff is all over the table, and I can't get to work if dinner's all over the table. And so, yeah, it forces us to kind of constantly be transitioning the space and tidying up as we go.
Yeah, I really love that approach because you can have a bigger house if you want to, but you're choosing to maintain their size because it keeps you accountable and you don't actually have to have the big of a space anyway. So I love that approach. But is there a specific feature in your home that you're the most proud of?
Hmm. Well, I can say our home is over 120 years old. And so it has very, very limited storage. I live with my two daughters, my husband, and a dog. And we have two tiny closets for the entire home. And so I'm really proud of how I've maximized those closets and installed kind of smart, simple systems. Like in our entryway, we built a little makeshift cabinet where everybody can kind of dump the bags and the backpacks and the dog leashes and all of those things remain behind closed doors. And it's really just this tiny little footprint in our home, but it has been game changing. So I would say just overall, like working with a real lack of space and closets and figuring out creative ways to maximize the space we do have.
First of all, it's really impressive that your house is 120 years old. That's actually unfathomable to me. Unfathomable. That's a bit of a mouthful. I'm sorry about that. It's unfathomable to me. And second of all, just really impressive that you managed to maximize like that little of a space, which I'm sure you'll share a bit more about with us in the next section. But before we move on, is there a course that you've taken in your lifetime that has inspired you and stuck around with you to this day?
So, I'm signed up for the masterclass series, and I'm not much of a chef. I love eating. I love traveling. I love restaurants. My brother is actually a chef, but Thomas Keller has a course on how to cook an egg that I just found. I loved the simplicity of it. And actually, the technique aligns with minimalism. It's like choosing the best ingredients, but keeping it very, very simple and pared down. So I would say that's one that just feels very practical to me. And in general, I've loved taking the masterclass series.
That's really cool. I've seen ads of it online and I've seen Gordon Ramsay with all of that. I've just always wondered what was going on with that. So what were the biggest takeaways for you from that class?
Oh gosh. I mean, it's funny because I look through everything kind of through the entrepreneurial lens. So for me, it was less about cooking the egg and more about how to craft a course, how to make it really specific and actionable for people. And I think that was my biggest takeaway is that if you want to teach well, you have to oversimplify and you have to make each step actionable instead of abstract. So that's what I really loved is that, something as simple as cooking an egg, there is an art form to it. And there's like a step 1, a step 2, a step 3. And so it made me think about even the process of creating my own course or writing a book, how there has to be a very clear beginning, middle, and end. And you have to think about what you want people to get out of the course so that you can make it very concrete and easy to absorb.
Yeah, for sure. I even would argue that crafting a course in itself is an art form. That whatever you said just then about making every step actionable, having a beginning, middle, and end is very much, well, maybe it's not regarded by the masses as storytelling, but it sounds to me like it is storytelling. It's just for different purposes, not for entertainment purposes.
Exactly.
But at the same time, there's a bit of entertainment that goes into it in the sense of you have to keep the person who's taking your course entertained and occupied. So it can't be too simple. It can't be too difficult. They have to be stimulated the right amount all the way.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance. And I think in general, I tend to connect with things that are very specific and actionable instead of abstract, I think, which is probably why I love organization, because there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, when you're done. Whereas with a process like design, you could always keep designing. It's very, like to each their own, and people have different ideas of when a room is perfect. With organization, it's so concrete.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about that. So that's a perfect segue into our next section. And my first question for you before we begin is, how would you define home organization?
So I make home organization very, very simple. So I think it comes down to just adhering to 2 basic principles. One is grouping similar things together by category. And 2 is each category has a designated place or home. That's it. I mean, the overall objective of organization is to make your life or your work or your home easier and to run smoother. So another way of defining it would be to just say it's a system and a strategy for being able to find what you need when you need it.
Yeah, I really like the idea that it is a system. Most of the time, I feel like from what I've seen with my friends as well who haven't quite figured out home organization, not throwing my friends under the bus, I do this too. But we don't really approach it from the sense of it's a system, but more of just like, oh, it just belongs anywhere in the kitchen or it belongs anywhere in the living room and, not really designating one specific place to it, which ends up in clutter because you can put it anywhere in the kitchen and you don't really put it back in the drawers, stuff like that. So on the other hand, how would you define minimalism?
Yeah. So my definition of minimalism is being radically intentional. And so I think of it as a process and a mindset where you clarify what's important and you strip away the rest. You intentionally remove the things that aren't important. So it really is a values clarification exercise more so than an aesthetic. I think typically when people think about minimalism, they kind of conjure that image of like the stark white room, which ironically, I'm sitting in a very white room right now. But minimalism isn't a prescriptive formula or design aesthetic. To me, it's more of a philosophy, a way of living where you're being radically intentional with what you choose to bring into your life, what you choose to bring into your home. It's making decisions that support the values that you have and the life you want to lead.
For sure. I can see where that's coming from. And as a maximalist who is trying to be a bit more minimalistic, it is easy to think, well, isn't sentimental value important as well? But I guess it's kind of like you have to really think and be intentional about how much sentimental value is this, because everything can be sentimental value if you want it to be. But if you're a bit more intentional with what you actually keep, for example, like heirlooms or stuff that was passed down to you from your mom, who lives far away from you, that makes sense. But a flower pot that you got like 5 years ago that's broken now and you don't even use anymore, is that really sentimental value, or do you just want to keep it because you want to keep it,
Right. Well, here's the thing is that everybody has their own definition of what enough looks like. And so part of why I love my work is because it's so customizable. So what you might think is the perfect amount of stuff might be vastly different from what works for me. And that's okay. There's not a one size fits all solution here. It's really about determining what feels good to you, what gets you further to your goals. And taking the time to really audit and assess all of the parts of your life and your home and see what's really in service of the life that I want and what's just creating clutter and distraction. And that looks very different for each person with, each client I've worked with comes to a different solution. So I think a lot of it is about asking the question and answering it for yourself. What does enough look like? What feels like the right amount of stuff for me?
Right. And with that in mind, are there any specific core principles that of minimalism?
Yeah, so I think the main core principle is it's about clarifying what's important first and foremost. So it's deciding, what do I value? What are my top priorities for this season of my life? Where do I want to give my energy and my attention, right? Because we all have time scarcity. We all get the same amount of hours in the day. And almost everyone I've talked to in this like intense modern climate that we're living in with technology and buzzing and alerts and news and media and social media, it's deciding on purpose what I want to allow into my life and what I want to create a boundary around. And so the main principle is that kind of being intentional and defining what do I want to let in and what do I want to keep out on purpose. It's a mindfulness and an intentionality that you can truly apply to anything, from the things that you own in your home to your daily schedule, to your to-do list, to even something like how many friends you have and how many relationships you cultivate. So it's about deciding on purpose what works for you and what creates a feel good and good enough life.
Yeah. And how does this translate to shared homes?
Well, so it's so tricky, right? Because minimalism is a very personal exercise and one that will help you arrive at your own answers, but not necessarily answers that will align with your partner or your spouse or your kids or your friends. And so the way that I think about it is you invest the work to figure out what a good enough, home looks like for you, what your optimal amount of stuff is, what your clutter threshold is. But then it's a real negotiation with the people that you live with. So an example is, I live with a husband who has a very different clutter threshold than I do. I'm kind of on the extreme minimalist side of the spectrum. He's really not bothered by clutter or stuff on the counter or shoes on the floor. And so we've had to kind of negotiate where what we've arrived at is he actually has his own space in the back of our house, this small kind of freestanding studio where he works out of it. He has his personal items like his books and his music. And I don't go in there. I don't touch it. I don't monitor it. I don't tell him he has too much stuff. But then in our shared spaces, like our kitchen and our living room and our dining room, he's agreed to really maintain the kind of minimalist aesthetic and volume that works for me and makes me, be able to work and thrive. So it's all about coming to those like very creative solutions. The same goes for, I have 2 teenage daughters, right? And so they don't necessarily share my philosophy, but they're willing to maintain it, my standards in our shared spaces because it benefits them, because they can have friends over any day at the drop of a hat because we don't have to tidy or, scramble to get ready. Our house is always kind of ready for hosting and entertaining. So they love that. They love that they can have friends over and host parties and have sleepovers. But in their personal bedrooms, I have decided to let them do them. And so that means, as a parent, I set certain boundaries, like you can't have trash in your room or dirty dishes, but you can have maybe more stuff, like more clothes than I think is necessary, especially if they're prepared to buy them with their own hard-earned money, right? So it's a way in which we've kind of found, a way that everybody can win, even though we're in a very small home.
Yeah, I love that approach that you have with the allowing a small space for clutter for someone else to have their personal space, because some people just need that outlet sometimes. I
Yes.
know I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yes, it's definitely, my husband has said, he reaps the rewards of having a very tidy, orderly space, but it's a lot of work for him mentally to think about it and maintain it because it's not how his brain normally would work, right? Like if he didn't live with me, he would probably live in a much more carefree way, throwing his jacket on the floor when he came in, strewing things on the counters and not really caring. So he puts more energy and intention, but then he also has the space where he can just fully let loose and relax. And I have said, that is your space, you do you in that space.
Yeah, that's a really great solution. But what would you recommend in situations where a cohabitant is opposed to implementing minimalism in the home? Would it then be an inverse situation of you get a small personal space to keep things tidy?
I think so. Yeah. So I've had clients like that who, they say, I want my whole house to be super minimal and super tidy, but my family's not on board with it. It's not what they want. And so we have found different creative solutions. Sometimes that's a home office or, if space provides having kind of like a room of their own where they can really curate it and set it up and maintain it exactly how they want. But then things can be a little looser in, the rest of the family home. So I think it's looking for those opportunities of if your family or your cohabitants are not aligned, how can you kind of carve up the space in a way where everybody gets their needs met, at least in one space?
Yeah, and there's also a negative correlation between materialism and well-being, which has been confirmed by a lot of empirical studies. That being said, most of us do lie somewhere in the middle, where our value system is kind of taken into context. The sentimental attachments, like we mentioned before, to certain material objects. So, what is your opinion on this? What advice do you have for striking that balance between maintaining simplicity and retaining objects of sentiment? I know you mentioned before about keep analyzing and keeping a list of priorities, but how would you recommend going about this?
Yeah, so I think it's really about honoring and respecting the boundaries of your physical space. Every space is different, right? And most people, in order to function in a comfortable way in their home, don't want to have piles and piles on every surface just because it makes it more difficult to navigate. So I think, like, I'll give a very concrete example. My father passed away about 10 years ago, and I inherited an entire home full of his stuff. But as I mentioned, I live in a very small space with very limited storage. And so what I arrived at is we have a very small storage space underground in our home, a little basement. And I kind of assessed, I think we could fit, roughly 10 bins in this space. And so from his entire home with all the furniture and all the housewares and all the clothes, I pared all of that down to 10 bins where I could store the most sentimental objects for me. So that included things that were kind of unique and irreplaceable, like photos, handwritten letters, things that were really felt deeply sentimental, that I had the storage space for. But then I was able to sell or donate things like coffee mugs and plates and tea kettles and furniture, which I really had no use for and could go, to people that could really use it. So for me, that was a very difficult situation. It was very emotional. And having a physical boundary to say, all right, I've got these 10 bins. What do I want to fill them with? And I know that I have the storage space for them. Really helped my brain process and make decisions in an easier way. So, as I'm helping people negotiate things like inherited items, letters, mementos, photos, sometimes I just start with, how much space do you want to give for this? How much space do you have? And, sometimes I'm working with someone who lives in a tiny studio apartment. So they may say, like, I want to get all of my photos down to a single shoebox that I can put on top of my refrigerator because that's really the only space I have. So that gives a really nice boundary where then you can say, okay, I'm going to centralize all my photos and I'm going to pick only my favorites that fit within this box. I have heard feedback for years that that's really helpful for people, having a concrete visual boundary to give yourself.
Right. I really love that approach. It's kind of like packing for a trip and not knowing what to pack until you know that you have like 20 kilos of baggage. And you're like, okay, now I can bring this. Or if you only have like 7 kilos of carry on, then you're able to plan a bit better then. So that's really smart.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. I hope it's helpful.
That being said, cohabiting also comes with a slew of storage struggles. And like you said, you had a very, very small space to work with. So could you tell us a bit more about the storage solutions you found to be particularly effective for maintaining minimalism, especially with the functionality that shared homes demands?
Yeah. So I think, when I think of visual clutter, I think, everything that we see in our environment, we have to process. And so often clutter has been linked to anxiety and depression and overstimulation. And so what I have found in terms of storage solutions is the more that you can have them blend in with your environment, the better. So an example of this would be, actually, you can see the built-ins in my home. So we added these white built-ins that create a lot of storage behind me, but because we painted it all white and we have opaque doors instead of like a clear glass door, where you can see all of the contents, it's very visually restful for the eyes, right? So there's nothing almost to process. You just see sort of like a wave of white, just like a wall. But behind me is actually tons of stuff. Like what we have stored behind me is our entire liquor cabinet, our platters, our vases, our serving bowls for entertaining, my organizing supplies, our gift wrap, our kids' art supplies. So all of those tiny little things are housed in these cabinets. But the big thing that creates a minimalist aesthetic is just having doors. So I always say to people, like, open shelving is for displaying beautiful things. It's not for utilitarian things. So you don't want to have open shelves that have things like batteries and light bulbs and wires and, mouse traps, like those things that people have in their homes that nobody really wants to look at, right? Like you just don't want to see it. So creating either, something custom like built-ins, or just investing in furniture that has sliding doors or cabinets, or simply investing in monochromatic or matching storage bins or baskets or vessels, where your eyes can kind of rest because it's only seeing one color, one shape, one style, and then all of the little things are housed inside.
Yeah, and the great upside to that is the monochrome color palette is just so underrated as well. It's really, really sleek. It just, like you said, makes everything easier on the eye. And if you do something that's not white, if you're not a fan of white and you think it's too plain for you, if you go for another color, the same thing works, and it's going to be really bold, and it doesn't even have to apply for your entire home. It can be like a section, like a wall where you have a built-in and that's just one color, and even that's going to blend in with that wall.
Absolutely.
And it makes a statement at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have clients who love big, bold colors and textures and patterns and wallpaper. And I say, embrace that. Like, if that's what you love looking at and it doesn't feel overstimulating to you, go for it. Everybody's brain is wired differently, right? So for me, my brain is so busy and it never stops thinking. I like to come home to a very serene, neutral, kind of quiet, visually environment. But not everyone is like that. Some people who are creatives love seeing bold color. And like you said, you could have like a fluorescent lime green wall of storage if you wanted to. The same principle applies.
Yeah. So lastly, in your experience, what are the most impactful benefits of implementing minimalism in a shared home environment?
Well, so the feedback I get, I've been in this career for about 15 years, and I've probably been myself a practicing minimalist for over 20. It's ease. It's ease in everything that you do. It's less decisions to make. It's less to process. It's less to maintain and keep up with. So the feedback that I get from clients or people who have read my books and applied my systems, they just say, I feel like I can exhale now in my home. It feels easier to clean up. I feel like I'm tidying less. There's less stress. I'm fighting less even with my family members. So it extends, there's like a ripple to everything. I've even had clients who say, I eat better now. I make healthier choices because I can find the healthy options, and I'm not just grabbing something because I don't want to, navigate through a cluttered pantry. So I can be more intentional with my eating. I've had people say they've gotten out of debt or hit a financial goal because they're able to be more productive. They're able to work, without distraction. So I would say, just across the board, minimalism really can have a positive effect on every aspect of your life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I feel like there's a huge misconception that minimalism is all plain and white and just nothing. It's so much more than that.
It is. I really want to emphasize, it's not about restriction. It's about freedom.
Yeah.
And it's about leveraging it as a tool to create more of what you want, whatever that may be. I can say in my life, I travel more, I host more parties, I have more time to hang out with my family. All of that feels like freedom. None of it feels like restriction.
For sure. And it's definitely not interior style. That's another misconception, I think. It's more of a lifestyle. It's a way of life.
Exactly. It's about maximalizing your life, ironically. And I think people think like minimalism, oh, I'm going to have to get rid of everything and give up pleasure. No, it's really about the opposite. It's about letting go of the things that are not serving you and embracing the fun stuff, making more time and more space and more energy for the things that light you up and that you care about deeply.
Yeah, and I'm really inspired to actually implement minimalism into my life now, which I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I know I have like 5 bins at home that I need to really start decluttering, that I just haven't been able to because there's so many things where I'm just like, what if I need this in the next 10 years for like one very obscure possibility? So this leads me into the next section, which is the practices and habits section, where I ask you about the everyday application of minimalism. And my first question for you is, what is a habit that you practice to maintain minimalism throughout the home?
Yeah, I mean, a really simple one is just practicing the 1 in, 1 out rule. If I want to buy something new, I kind of force myself to get rid of a similar object. So unless, of course, there's something that we need that we don't have. But typically, I'm kind of at a phase with my home where we have all of the basic essentials to run our lives smoothly. So if, for example, like I love vintage jeans, if I want to go buy a new pair of vintage jeans because I share a small closet with my husband and I only have so much room, I then have to look and see what pair of jeans or other item of apparel am I willing to get rid of. So it keeps me really honest and it kind of keeps the equilibrium in my home now that I am at a place where everything feels good. It feels like we have just enough without too much, without the excess. So when I want to buy something, whether that's like an item of apparel or a new houseware, I do pretty diligently practice that 1 in, 1 out. I also just integrate quick tidies into the transitions of my day. So I never want to face a big pile of laundry or big pile of mail or a massive amount of clutter. So because of that, I kind of integrate these quick little tidies into my day. So if I'm leaving the house, I'll do a quick reset. I'll wipe down a counter. I'll put dishes in the dishwasher. When I come in with the mail, I'll immediately take all of the junk mail and put it into the recycling bin. So it's like integrating tiny, smart habits so that you never amass a giant pileup. That's what I'm always teaching, this compound effect of small, smart decisions lead to massive transformation. You don't want to get to the point where you have to take 2 weeks off of work to slog through your entire home. It's really about taking that beat when you get home to say, I'm going to hang my coat up on the hook. I'm going to put my shoes away. It's just going to take me 2 seconds, and then I won't have to deal with a pile later.
Yeah, I love that you use the word tidies as well, because it makes it sound really fun and small and cute, which is pretty much in line with what it is. If you like kind of just rewire your brain a little bit to think like these tidies are cute and like little small exercises that you can do, then they sound a bit more approachable.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm into this concept I invented called the 15-minute win. So if you feel overwhelmed by a project, you just set a timer for 15 minutes. You see what you can do. Can I knock it out? Can I just clean out the junk drawer? Or can I just tidy the surface? Or, staring at that big pile of dishes, can I just quickly knock them out in 15 minutes? And it is really shocking what you can accomplish in 15 minutes if you just focus on it. And then it's like a win that can compound. Lots of 15-minute wins result in a very clean, tidy environment.
That's actually adorable, and I have to start trying that because I've never thought of it as a win, but they are wins. They certainly are wins to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, each one is a victory.
that makes me feel so much better about cleaning, Shira. Like, you have no
good.
idea. You
I
have
love
changed
it.
my life. But with the one in, one out rule, I was really curious to know, are there any challenges when it comes to doing this practice? Are there any times where you go like, oh, I don't really feel like doing this one out thing at the moment. I'm gonna put it off to the next time so I can do it a bit more like in one go.
Well, here's the thing is that the way my systems are set up, like I only have a certain amount of hangers in my closet. So if I buy, say, a new blouse, there is literally nowhere to hang it. I don't have extra reserve hangers. So it kind of forces me, because I guess it bothers me to have things like on the floor or on a chair. So I guess wanting things to look really streamlined and beautiful is a motivating force for me. I think for other people, I think you have to go back to a vision of what you want your home to look like and feel like that feels compelling enough to motivate you. If you don't have that, it's easy to put it off. But if you've come up with a vision of like, I want my home to feel like a sanctuary, or I want a home where I can always have people over, then as you bring new things in, you just have to do the check and balance of, is this furthering my goal of feeling calm at home or being able to host, or is it not? And sometimes it will be worth it to buy the extra hanger or have your hangers be a little snug in the closet. Again, that's why this is so customizable. For me, I love space between hangers. I love feeling like my home is really spacious and there's more, air and light than clutter and stuff. I have other clients who say, you know what, I'd rather have more options, even if it means a little less spaciousness. So again, you get to do you and you get to decide what your threshold is.
Right, that does give a lot of freedom as well for any kind of possibility, because sometimes we generally do have these moments where we do need to buy one thing and we don't really necessarily have the time to get rid of something. Yeah, would you recommend actually maybe getting rid of items before actually going out and buying the new item that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, that's even better. I think that's harder for people to do, but I will say, I mean, just a quick tip is you want to make it really easy to donate and to pass things along. So I hang an empty tote bag in both of our closets. So as something, falls out of favor or maybe doesn't fit, I have a place where I can toss it. And then when that bag is full, I know just where I can donate it that's convenient in my neighborhood. So I tell people, as just a very simple tip, create a vessel to corral your donations, put it in a convenient spot so that you have a place for them as they arise. And then also have in the back of your head, where are my local resources? Where can I, sustainably, easily dispose of these things, whether it's like, electronics that you want to recycle, or textiles or housewares you want to give away. Do you have a neighborhood group? Do you have a community center or a church or a theater you belong to, a preschool if you're a parent? But identifying those resources so that you can make it really easy and appealing to get things out the door is going to really help encourage you to do so.
That's really smart. I like the idea of setting those items aside, and as they pile up, when it's gone to a sizable amount, you can go and then donate it or give it away. That's a really smart idea. It's kind of the same as what you were talking about with the system. This really helps, really, with implementing
That's
it.
the idea, yes. Love it.
So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I feel like I learned an incredible amount about minimalism. I had some idea of what it was before, but I feel like I've gotten a much more detailed idea of what it's like. So now I'll move on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is yours, Shira. Take it away.
Oh, wow. How exciting. Well, it's funny. What I'm passionate about is this. So I think, the main takeaway that I hope for your listeners is that organization and minimalism can be easier and more approachable than you think. I think people make it much more complicated and much more overwhelming. So kind of what I want to leave you with is start with your why. Start with, why do I want to get more organized? Or why am I interested in maybe pursuing a more minimalist lifestyle? What right now feels sticky or tricky or challenging that I want to change? And once you have a really clear and compelling why, then I would say the next step is always to start with volume management. So people often want to skip right to the systems and right to the pretty stuff. Like, I'm going to run out and buy all the bins and all the baskets and all of the organizing gizmos and gadgets. I would say, no, like halt. You always want to start by assessing volume and seeing, what are the things that are really helping my life and supporting me? What are the things maybe I have duplicates, maybe I have things that are broken or I've never touched, or just feel stressful to keep for whatever reason. Cut the clutter and then work on setting up the most simple, streamlined systems. So I always tell people, set up your systems so that a 5-year-old could understand them without you even explaining them, right? So we rent our house a lot on Airbnb and other, home exchange sites. I try to set up our home so when a stranger walks into it, they know where to hang their coat, they know where to get a mug for coffee or tea without any signs or any explanation. So if you want to set up a home that feels easy, think about it through the 5-year-old lens of, are the systems easy and intuitive enough that a child could figure them out without an explanation? And then finally, thinking about the cherry on top is, once you've clarified your motivation, you've cleared the clutter, and you've really pared down on volume, and you've set up some really simple, easy to maintain systems, then and only then, if you want to go out and treat yourself to a pretty bin or a basket or matching hangers for your closet, then by all means. But I just caution people to wait until the end to then have it be kind of like the reward at the end for editing and organizing and making their life easier. So those are the things I kind of want to leave people with, is just make it easy, make it fun, and do the 5-year-old test.
Amazing, terrific tips from you, Shira. I feel like I could definitely use that 5-year-old test. My partner is always constantly asking where things are, because it's just not intuitive in my home. So I could definitely do that as well. Now, before we end off, I have one last question for you. You mentioned in your house tour on your website that you have yet to master the art of properly folding bed sheets. How's the progress on that?
It's terrible. Yeah, I'll be really honest. That fitted sheet, I have watched videos. I have had other organizing colleagues give me demonstrations. I cannot do it. And I have just determined life is too short. And so my hack for making a sustainable solution for sheets is simply to put them in a pretty vessel. So I have in our linen cabinet just beautiful linen bins, and I just toss those sheets right in, and I don't look back, and nobody sees them, the balled up mess that lives inside. So I hope that also frees people to feel like nothing has to be perfect here. This isn't about perfectionism. It's really about functionality and whatever makes your life easier. And so for me, that's giving up on a perfectly folded, fitted sheet.
Absolutely. I definitely feel a little bit less intimidated myself. And the life hack here, I guess, is essentially get pretty bins, put everything, all the clutter in there. I mean, not randomly. No,
get rid of the clutter, but put the things you care about in bins by category. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So if our listeners want to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
Yeah, so my website is my name, shiragill.com. You can also follow along on Instagram and on Substack, my newsletter, for lots of free tips and inspiration and resources. And finally, my 2 books are out and sold wherever books are sold. I know they're available in Australia, which is great. So my first book is Minimalista, and my second book is Organized Living. And my third book, Lifestyle, will be out later this fall.
Amazing. We'll link those to the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episodes.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organization Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.